Hi, friends. Who's Derek here? Who's talking to friends, people? This live stream is titled A Depressing Waste of Time. That's what I find arguing about cognitive functions to be. A depressing waste of time. Hi, Found Bacon. How are you today? Hi, Jerry Like the Mouse. The reason I find it a depressing waste of time is pretty straightforward. It's that it's not really possible to negate something that doesn't have a framework. Otherwise, you'll just constantly get shifted away from any sort of meaningful definitions, right? It may have been entertaining, but it's not fun for me. It's a waste of time, and it's depressing because it's like it proves the limits of rhetoric to communicate, and it proves what happens when I engage in rhetorical adversarial discourse instead of dialectic. It makes me mad. I spent too many years doing good adversarial discourse, so Noah McFarlane. The stream title also happens to be the title of my autobiography, A Depressing Waste of Time. It's funny, but a little sad, Noah. Though to meaningfully negate socionics would have to be purposely trying to do something specific. And it's not. It's a mishmash of different explanations. It doesn't know what it is or why it is. That's hard to negate, you know? I'm going to always be dragged down into nodes, arguing about specific details that are not relevant to the larger picture issues. Because, of course, the thing you're negating doesn't adhere to its own framework at all. It doesn't have a framework to adhere to. Then it's going to be difficult to point out where it's contradictory to itself because it just simply shifts ground. Some things mean yeah, and some things mean yeah. Well, that's the thing. No, introverted intuition adjudicates against a universal metric. It's usually correct. It tries to be correct, not self-serving. That's why disinterested or interested calculus is critical information here. Now, note it's not a calculus at all, so it's neither objective nor subjective, because only calculi can be objective or subjective. It's something Jack can't seem to get through his head. Data can be, people can be, nothing else can be. And he's not making a distinction, and he's fighting me about it the whole way down the line. It's not worth my time or energy. I'm not going to... It's like he's making me fight outside the city gates. This is the kind of shit I can't stand when adversarial rhetoric becomes contradictory to progress in the dialectic. Right, because he won't define things meaningfully. He won't define things in ways that link to other definitions because he has no framework. Socionics has no framework, so what do you expect, you know? If you want to engage in adversarial rhetoric, and you're an ENTP of any competence at all, you can prevent any progress from being made argumentatively. I could do it too. You know, it's like, it's easy enough. But it's also not a good use of my time because there's no way to make any progress if we're not arguing about the right thing. We're arguing outside of the city gates, so to speak. To argue inside the city gates is to argue about, first and foremost in this instance, what are we doing and why, right? But that's not something Jack even has the lexicon to begin to argue with me.
No.
And so it's right, exactly. I can't convince anybody of the correctness of my system by debating one-on-one because that's not the sort of thing that we're dealing with it. Arguing does refine my understanding of why I can't do that specifically. Like, in other words, I'm never going to successfully negate something that doesn't affirm in a meaningful way. To be negated, something has to be negatable, right? And to be meaningful, something has to be negatable. But however, you can attach to it a meaningless thing that's non-negatable, but more or less, by simply refusing to have any meaningful framework. Which when I'm just banging my head against the wall, you know?
Hi, Octavia Silva.
Hi, Octavia Silva. Hi, Hambone.
Hey, Hambone.
Thanks for saying I look nice in this color. This says TWFP on it too, see?
It does look good in this color. I think so too. Yeah, TWFP. Is that during camp?
I don't remember exactly when the shirt was made, but I do know that Kimberly made this shirt.
Well, it's very campish.
Yeah, you can tell because she got these iron-on things.
Yeah.
Rather
like
than
the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, the shirts that are screen printed are a lot better, in my opinion. But
yeah.
But these are still fine.
I just keep thinking it does. It does look like a camp TWFP shirt.
I think it was my TWFP Army shirt.
Yeah.
Like, this is what the soldiers in the TWFP Army wear.
Corporal Strauss.
Mark Francois. Grow up. This is one of the weird things that hate monkeys like to accuse me of is immaturity.
Wow.
Which is funny because when did I ever claim to be mature?
And like, when is trolling mature?
It's like why is maturity such a highly sought attribute? I never claimed to be mature. I did claim and do claim to be correct about things for good reason. But yeah, the spite monkeys are funny. They devote like their entire lives to hating me. It's so crazy. They came during that debate yesterday and started saying hateful shit. And it's like, wow, what a poisonous, toxic mess the inside of their soul must be.
I guess the internet reveals them more clearly. Whereas, and you never really knew. Maybe you would think that your neighbor was quite monkey, maybe some close friends, but now they reveal themselves so much more easily through the internet.
Are all sensory experiences able to be expressed in a way that information isn't lost? I mean, no sensory experiences are able to be expressed in a way in which information isn't lost. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of contradictions in there. Okay, well, I don't doubt that catch a fart may have been Jeebus.
Catch a fart?
There's another person in there besides that, though, who was expressing more hateful things than catch a fart, who was just sort of trolling. Octavia, so that's funny. Thank you for your promotional efforts. Appreciate it. He said, 16 watching now. Please press like to attempt to summon Winston's mom, who is better at this than me.
That's great.
That is pretty funny. Here's my weed. Yeah, I figured that was Jeebus as well, Hambone. But
was I the one who blocked him?
Who?
Signed him out? I don't know. I signed out someone yesterday because the language was not good, so I was like, But
I don't know.
Okay, I don't think it was then.
Yeah, well, it was annoying me because I need to get control of that room. I need to, right now I need to get the login and stuff from Lightbulb because if I'm going to use that room at all, I need to be able to have, I need to have admin powers. Like one of my concerns is that I work later today. I do not want people coming into that room when I'm working with kids, and so it's like that sort of thing is a little concerning to me. It's something I need to get on and deal with. But it's not a big deal. It's just got to get around to dealing with it and contact Lightbulb about it.
I think light bulb will have it under control for a while, and then she said herself that she's not looking to do this permanently, but then you can go back to it. I think the chips will fall where they may, and it'll probably be the way that it was supposed to be. This is why people don't understand INFJs, because they say sentences like that.
Well,
You got me, and that's why I love you.
no, I didn't hear them. Bacon, what did they say? I didn't hear them at all. Put down the headphones. I was just like, fuck this.
Good.
I'm going outside.
Hell yeah, baby. Your high five.
Oh, Jeremy's fine. Well, I mean, they can call him a Jack's patience all they want. They can say, I'm impatient. That'd be fair. It's like if there's anybody who deserves critique yesterday, it's me. It's not Jack. Jack did the best he could with what he has available to him. Yeah, it's Jeremy. I don't dispute critiques of me based on yesterday. A lot of critiques can be made of me based on yesterday. I'm disappointed in myself. I should have done a better job. But the part of the reality is I'm disappointed in myself in ignoring what I knew going in, which was this is a waste of my time and I'm not going to get anywhere because there's not enough of a background knowledge for me to even have a meaningful conversation with them,
Mom's blood is depressing most of the time. It's just so perfect that there's nothing I can do with it. Pretty
No, I don't know if it was illuminated or not. I mean, I think that based on what I know about most people and the way I dealt with things yesterday, and just I'm not at 100% right now. I guess you could say. I know that most people probably concluded that I was flying off the handle, upset, impatient, angry, emotional, or other stuff that's irrelevant to the question at hand. So it's like that's not even the point. It's like
Well, it was okay. So, yeah, but you didn't fly off the handle that much. You've seen way worse.
Yeah, that's true. This is that, Rachel. I got to tell you, that is the one piece of solace I had yesterday. At the end of the whole thing was that I didn't fly off the handle that much, and I could have been way worse.
Yeah.
That's the one piece of solace that I took from it as well.
Good.
But I nevertheless, my most takeaway from it is the need for me to shape my battles, not pick my battles, but shape them. Willfully shape them rather than let them unfurl before me as though I had no willful control over the thing.
Exactly. Take that time in between, the date that you made the.
I thought about it, but the thing is, it's hard for me to follow through on my decision because I'm such a counterpuncher by nature.
Yeah, no. You know who you would be in the movie Snatch?
Who?
You'd be the boxer guy in it. He's like he's a one punch hitter out, and that's how you are. Like you can't help it. Even if you're told and promised that you would lose, it's just in your nature. But you did good, I thought.
What is my issue with what happened?
He just didn't have any knowledge.
No, what happened is I went into a situation knowing I was trying to negate something that wasn't fundamentally negatable because it's not an affirmation that's done properly, right? So it's like if you're not affirming anything that's specific, that's what it is. If you don't have any definition for what it is, or if you don't have any, in other words, there's nothing in socionics that allows you to falsify it because it refuses to be anything specific when you try to. It's set up to be both non-falsifiable and not meaningfully negatable as a consequence because it doesn't have any framework, so you can't hold it accountable to its own framework. My affirmation has a framework, so it can be held accountable. Therefore, it's fundamentally a preferable affirmation. You can meaningfully falsify or critique my framework by comparing my definitions against other definitions I provide and noting contradictions therein. You cannot do that with socionics because it doesn't attempt to be a good affirmation in the first place, which makes it almost impossible to negate.
What kind of affirmation was it trying to make?
It doesn't know what it's trying to do. That's why I can't adequately critique it because it's not saying what it's trying to do. Then I can't prove it fails to do that thing.
That's a big deal because it seems to try to do the best to compare couples, compare pairs. That's what it seems to want to do, right? Because it has all these labels for how all the 16 types get along. But if it doesn't say that's what it's supposed to be doing, then that's not what it's doing.
Okay, well, look, I want to answer Alexander Cruz's question. The answer to that question is it was one bit of tea I added on the title. I didn't want it to be a debate, but I knew that that's what everybody else wanted it to be. And I figured it would turn into one anyway. And it did turn into something like a debate in that we were at each other's throats the whole time. They're at odds the whole time. If you want to look at an alternative to that, watch one of the debates I have with Right Ruminations, where you have two people who are actually talking to each other. You know?
You did say you didn't want to be a debate. You did.
I did say that. And you're right. Well, why did I title it a debate then, Alexander Cruz? Because that's a better title, for the video. Because that's what everybody else was calling it. That's what it was. It's like there's no point in me. There's no point in me trying to spin what was inevitably going to turn into what it turned into.
Okay, so he kept his temper, but he did not have the knowledge that you did on the subject.
Right. Well, I'm not saying I was perfect.
No.
Well, whatever you think it is, then, Alexander Cruz, what difference does it make what I call it in the title? It doesn't matter. It rose by any other name, If you think it was a debate, it was a debate. If you think it wasn't a debate, it wasn't a debate. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Hi, beauty queen. It's so good to see you this morning.
Right. We didn't want the same thing. He wanted to defend socionics. And I found myself negating it. When you keep hitting up against the defense, when you try to make points, then you end up going on offense the whole time. It was a frustrating inevitability that I knew was going to happen, but I didn't have a clear enough shape in my mind beforehand to really prevent it because I'm an SI user. I need to experience things to know. And I really needed to think through that thing, Yeah, I know, Alexander Cruz. That's true. And the thing is, of course, there's a complete failure to back up his claims. He was on defense the whole time.
Yeah.
He had absolutely no offense on the flow. I was on offense the entire time. He was on defense the entire time. By any meaningful critique of the round, quote unquote, I absolutely destroyed him. But that's not how regular people are necessarily going to perceive it because that's not how lay judges judge things, right?
Yeah.
So I understand that. But of course, by any debate standard, he had zero offense on the flow. No. I had all offense on the flow. I won the round hands down. So if it were a debate, and I did make that claim, and I framed it like that when I shouldn't have, which is true, and a fair critique, Alexander Cruz, completely fair critique. Well, I upheld my end of the bargain, regardless.
You did.
So there may be people out there who don't view it that way because they don't interpret debates in that way and they don't judge them in that way. But I don't care because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about anyway.
You're upset about it because you didn't want to do it.
Right? The thing is, I'm not upset because I lost, quote unquote.
No,
You know,
you
like
lost.
I said, by any reasonable judgment of the quote unquote round, I wiped the floor with him. I was on offense the whole time. He was on defense the whole time. He scored no points essentially, and he sort of battled me back with his dissembling into reducing my offense to, to a few small points. So it's like almost nothing got done, but I clearly won. So that's what did I want that to happen? No. Did I frame it like that in the first place? Yeah, I did, Alexander Cruz. I did. You're right. And that's one of the reasons why I'm disappointed with myself. I get tired of the wrongnesses persisting I should have known that, it's like, what am I going to accomplish by doing this? I'm going to frustrate myself. I'm going to bang my head against the wall because I'm trying to negate something that's structured to be unnegatable. Which means, of course, it's not an affirmation anybody should have any faith in at all, but that is a difficult explanation to give. The fact that because it fails to do what an affirmation ought to do, that is, it fails to provide a framework by which we can understand whether or not it's successful. If you refuse to define what your mission is, then it's hard to say you failed to accomplish your mission, isn't it? If you won't define what it is, then it's hard to prove you failed to accomplish it. Thank you, darling.
Do you not like the...
No, I like that fine. I like that better.
Okay.
I'm not very attentive to that sort of thing. I'll make this pillow go away so it looks a little neater and tidier.
Whatever to you.
Mark Francois, you are projecting, my friend. If, in fact, I were biased and influenced by those sort of things, then what would I do? Let's see if we can think, Mark Francois. Well, then I would disagree with Alexander Cruz when she points out a good point, and I'd be influenced by my subjective bias to say, no, Alexander Cruz, that's not true. But instead, I completely agree with her. That's a valid point, a valid critique, and she is correct. And I'm disappointed in myself for my failure. See, that's what it means to be objective about oneself, Mark Francois. Something you probably have never been and never will be.
It's also taking, accountability.
Right. I'm accountable.
Yeah.
So unlike people like Mark Francois who are just hate monkeys. I'm not interested in talking to Jack anymore. No, because the thing is, we're doing fundamentally different sort of things. He's willing to shift definitions mid debate, add nuance to it, add special pleading right off the bat. Yeah, it's like what's the point then? What is the point in arguing with this person when he's that interested in dissembling? When he's going to say, oh yeah, it's possible that meaning exists outside of an observer. Come on now.
I have a question unrelated.
Uh-huh.
I found the eyepiece for the aviators.
Oh, cool.
At some point, do you think you could try to put it back on?
Yeah, I did try before I failed, but I will try again.
Cool.
We'll be able to get it eventually. I just have to try a little harder.
Or something.
No, we got to just poke it through, and I'll figure it out.
Okay. I'll put my glasses.
Well, I understand that, and I understand that I'm not doing a good job of making that better. I watched a lot of Naruto this morning, And I was dehydrated at the end from all the sobbing because it's so inspirational. You know,
It is.
Naruto, he never gives up. Naruto never gives up. He never gives up, and he never varies from the truth in his ninja way, you know? And he's noble and just and good. It makes me cry to watch Naruto because it's such a moral show.
Yeah, it really is.
And I appreciate that.
I love everything about it. I think the music is amazing. The artwork is amazing. It's a great story. And you're really rooting for him.
Yeah. Well,
In
and
Tree's Village.
and there's all these instances when everybody else is making so much more sense, right?
And
Than
Naruto.
he is.
Yeah.
They're saying, look, Naruto, we got to be realistic about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you gotta be slow. You can't.
It's the perfect kind of speech that's going to convince you in no uncertain terms that, like, okay, it's time for Naruto to grow up, right? Like Mark Francois was saying to me, right? It's like time for you to grow up, Naruto. And at the end of that speech about growing up and stuff, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, they're right, Naruto, you need to grow up. And then Naruto's like, no.
I'm just gonna do it
And
anyway.
she's like, no, I will not. I will not vary from my truth. I will not waver from the righteous path.
Can't use my
It's the very best incarnation of ESFP imaginable, you know?
Yeah.
And it really makes me emotional, even just thinking about it. Yeah, he's the best ESFP in history.
Yeah, he is.
What you looking for, lovely lady?
My beer.
Your beer?
Yeah. I opened one up.
You opened it yourself?
Yeah.
With your own hands and fingers?
Yeah. Oh, I found it.
There it is.
Thank you.
That's more Sakura-chan's strategy. Sorry.
That's all right.
Fly there. Sakura-chan likes to hit Naruto a lot. She's kind of an abusive friend. So, anyway. I was just managing my optics in the moment. Sort of. I'm not managing my optics now. I mean, I guess I am. But that's not their primary teleology. Yeah, well, that's why there's not going to be a next time. Anchor Jason Blood. Unless the resolution is adequately narrow. Even then. There's no fun at all. Being on offense the entire time. Having to fight for every square centimeter of ground the entire time. It's a fucking torture. It's torture is what it is. It's like if I watched that round, I would be so angry at the dissembler by the end of it that my bout would be filled with exclamation points and stuff. You need to answer those questions. Oh, you're talking about me being only honest when it benefits him. You're a liar, ESTP. And another hate monkey. I am not only honest when it benefits me. It's not true. That's a dishonest statement. I'm honest even when it doesn't benefit me. But unlike hate monkeys and spite monkeys, I don't cross lines. I don't lie about people. I don't steal from them like the hate monkey stole from me. And I don't commit federal crimes against people like the hate monkeys committed a federal crime against me with identity theft. Or to look into what the statute of limitations of that is. And you want to see real wrath, spite monkeys, hate monkeys. You want to see some real wrath? How about I report this federal crime that's been committed against me? Remember, it's a big difference between reporting a crime that's been committed against you and what spite monkeys might try to do, which is report some sort of wrongdoing on my part, like he sometimes doesn't take his medication as prescribed or something. There's a big difference between being a victim of a federal crime and just being a spite monkey talking shit, you know? So spite monkeys should watch themselves a little bit. They hate monkers. They hate monkeys. Those who can't stand my correctness. They can't stand the fact that I'm righteous and I'm honest. They can't stand it. The spite monkeys are abhorrent of honesty and truth and justice and the righteous path. And so they spin all sorts of lies and hate about me. Well, they feed on my attention. I mean, to a certain extent, it's the just consequence of their own bad behavior, right? That I give them enough attention that they waste their entire lives hating me. Think about what a toxic, hate-filled pit of anger it must be to be walking around one of these spider monkeys who spend so much time paying attention to the object of their ire. You know, when I had to go through the torture of a failure to communicate with somebody, in other words, a failure to make a real communication instead of just be adversarial, it wore me out. You know, I don't like being adversarial. I actually try to communicate. I try to make a real connection with people and real communication with people, but it requires honesty on both parts, you know? And spite monkeys are fundamentally dishonest people. That's the one thing that underlies everything that they do is dishonesty and accountability avoidance syndrome. So, you know, am I going to periodically give them a little bit of attention? Yeah, I guess so. Well, Jim Webb. Yeah, sure. That's a fair critique, too. I'm not really in the mood for hearing your critiques right now, though. But it's fair. I didn't afford him enough. Well, that's actually not a fair critique. To say that I barely let him speak is a lie. But I did take too much time and afforded him too little space to speak. That's a fair critique. Once again, I'm honest. You see, this is the thing that they have. This is why it's worthwhile to pay attention to them, Cerebels. Because after all, they do make some correct critiques sometimes. They're looking for anything they can use against me. Some of it is correct. So it does keep me on the straight and narrow for sure. If I am wrong about something, if I made a mistake in some way, I'm going to hear it from the other person, right? I'm going to hear it from the hate monkeys. They're going to spin it as badly as they can, like that. Say that I barely let him speak. Well, that's not true. It is true that I monopolized the time too much, that I got upset, that I could have done a better job, you know? He's an ENTP. Yeah, many times being honest was not beneficial for me, and I did get a whole lot of blowback. Yeah, I remember the whole summer camp thing. I got all kinds of blowback. But, you know, I'm human. I make mistakes. I take my lumps. I don't run and hide from them. I don't deny everything that's pointed out when it's not complimentary to me. You know, I'm not dishonest. See, that would be unfair of me. I don't want Jack to have to defend socionics completely because one of his points is that he has his own understanding of it that's better than the existing understanding of it, which is fine. So it's like, Winston's mom also suggested working that angle of pointing out that socionics isn't anything specific. It's a bunch of different mushy things. But I felt that it would be unfair to work that angle because presumably Jack has a specific understanding. So it's sort of a structural advantage I wasn't willing to take advantage of. Because I'm the only one coming up with my thing doesn't mean I should be able to work that angle argumentationally. So I didn't. In fact, I worked the opposite. I said, okay, Jack, here's what I'm not going to do. What I said was that I'm not gonna hold him accountable for the mishmash of various thinkers of varying qualities who That's a very good question, Horse Mumbler. It of course evokes the question, is observation a quality that gets imbued into an object that persists after the observer dies or something, I would say the thing is, maybe in such a circumstance, it's never found later. There's never a circumstance where it's found later. Maybe that's the reality of it. I'm sure you're probably thinking, well, I'm sure we could find an example of that. I don't know. I'm not sure to the extent to which, observers other than human can sustain the existence of something comprised of meaning, right? It's a very good question. I don't have an answer to it right now. Okay, well that may be the truth. Ram CNW. Ram CNW, you are a truth speaker. I don't think Jack was really being dishonest. I think he doesn't understand that being able to parse away things with vagaries is dishonesty. I think he's being reflexive. Thanks. Like I said, this is a TWFP Army shirt. If you're a TWFP Army man, I guess you wear this. Yeah, dishonesty implies level of consciousness of it, right? So he's incorrect by reason of wrong frame. Like he's incorrect by reason of category error, and is unaware of it. Dissimilating is a process by which you take advantage of every degree of vagueness you can to make it impossible to define anything meaningfully in a discussion so you can use it for any other purpose. The point of defining things in dialectic is so that you can use it to eliminate things, find contradictions, make determinations about which is preferable given a certain set of options, and other kind of calculations like that. That's dialectic. The purpose of it is to make progress intellectually. Adversarial rhetoric has within it all the tools of dialectic, but is used under a different frame of intentionality. So it's like sometimes it's correct to point out that there's sufficient vagary that we ought not conclude about a certain definition. That would be a dialectic process. But you can use that mechanism of argumentation under the wrong set of intentions, and then you end up with dissembling. So it's like basically anytime that you're trying to avoid operationalizing your terms, in other words, making them useful within a given framework, or you're trying to keep them outside of any framework, or you don't want them to be critiqued within any given framework. In other words, you won't even allow it to be tested against consistency within itself. And that's to get to the nuts and bolts of that requires some basic agreement that we're trying to achieve consistency that looks like X. If you start going, well, no, we don't necessarily need to. Another way to think about it is necessary but insufficient burdens. When you start applying necessary but insufficient burdens to people, then you're dissembling almost always. So it's like, well, before you can argue that we ought to do this, you need to prove that you and I both exist first, right? That's applying a necessary but insufficient burden. You have to prove this before you can get to the actual ground we're talking about. That's dissembling, trying to fight outside the city gates. What's my take on subtypes? I think to the extent that there are subtypes, they're explained by Enneagram and the Enneagram tritype and sexual variants, and not by anything else. That there's no meaningful subtype mechanism architecture for cognitive functions. There are 16 cognitive function types, and that's it. And that differentiation within the types is consistent with it's one of the ways we can tell if a system is describing it correctly, because it will allow for the same amount of breadth of display as we actually see within a given type. What do you think of music theory? Is it worth learning? People say learning music theory limits creativity. What do you think? I don't think it limits creativity. I think your creativity angle on stuff is going to be determined mostly by your cognitive functions. So for me, music theory is going to have a hard time. No, I have offered big praise for that guy before, but I haven't watched him much. So I need to talk to him more. It's like my music theory is kind of iffy, and I never really use it anyway. I took music theory in college. I learned it okay, but I never use it in any of my things that I'm doing. Sometimes I'll remember intervals is like the only thing I'll sometimes use. I'll go, okay, well, I want this to be a perfect fifth up. How many steps is that? Minor second, major third, major third, perfect fourth, tritone, perfect fifth. 7. Okay, it's 7 steps. No, we haven't scheduled any summer camp 2020, but it definitely is not canceled. It's maybe in the works still. I'm not sure. Fuck COVID. COVID's not mine. I refuse to be COVID's bitch. I agree with you, Octavia Silva. That's why I'm not a expert on Enneagram, because I think that when you're talking about variation within the types, you're talking about obviously something that's not accounted for by the types, right? In other words, if I say these are all oranges, and you're like, but some are bigger than the other ones, I go, yeah, but they're still all oranges. So we have to have a definition of an orange that accounts for variations within size, for example. Some of these are sweeter than others. Well, we have to have a variation within orange that accounts for different kinds of sweetness. So not all oranges are exactly the same, but we can still have a definition of orange meaningfully that accounts for that variation within orange. They're not all perfectly the same as part of its definition. Same thing is true of types. If we have a definition that doesn't allow for that range, that doesn't mean we should apply subtypes. It means, okay, good. It's like if we have a definition that does allow for that range, we shouldn't look at that range and say, we haven't nailed it down tightly enough with cognitive functions. We should say, okay, good. Our cognitive function theory includes the amount of range it should have in display that's equal to what we observe in the real world. So now if we want to describe how that range happens, we'll have to use something other than cognitive functions. So there is range. It may be particularist in its origins, like in other words, your particular experience varies from somebody else in ways of SI links to your person, so that if that were the case, we could test that by saying that ENFJs are more alike each other than, say, ISFJs are alike each other. If it were the case that the range and differentiation linked to SI, then we would be able to test that and say that ENTJs are all very much alike, whereas ISFJs are all very different, because fundamentally differentiation within a type depends on how much SI plays a role. That's a theory as to a hypothesis as to why there's differentiation within a type. We could test that. I'm not making that claim, but it's just something that came to mind right now, right? That's an interesting claim that one might make, but it has falsifiability built into it because things are operationalized. If I say to you that the reason there's variation within a type is because SI is in the mix somewhere, so that all types will have variation within their type, but the types that have the highest SI in the stack will have the most variation within the type, and the types that have the lowest SI in the stacks will have the least variation in the type, because personal variation within a type description stems from SI. Let's say I were to make that claim. Well, it's a claim that when I make it, it's testable, right? It comes built in with a test. Well, if that's the case, then it would be the case that ENFJs and ENTJs are all more like each other than ISFJs and ISTJs are like each other. And we could sort of test that, right? We could at least do like an armchair philosophy test and see if it conforms with what we've observed so far. When I do that, I find it not a particularly good metric because I can't quite figure out how to define alike. So I would say, well, it's probably not, it's an interesting hypothesis, but we'd have to define alike better for it to be meaningfully used. That's what it means to care about operationalizing your terms and stuff. To care about how you can meaningfully use it to test itself. So, I might say that the range is caused by something like enneagram. In other words, saying that there's another aspect of mushiness that can't really be mechanically broken down, but that is taxonomied pretty well by enneagram. That we might look to that for an explanation of differentiation among types, among individuals of a type. But the critical thing is to show you how it's like, if I'm going to make a claim that's meaningful, I should also provide for you a way that we can both agree that it would be falsified. That if it's not tested yet, that we can think of a way to test it, even if we can't actually do that test right now. Something that's feasible to test, There's lots of testabilities in the way I approach cognitive functions, and there's no testabilities in the way socionics does. Socionics is based on a wheel. Enneagram is based on a pentagram shape, I think, basically a 5-pointed star, something like that. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an expert on Enneagram at all. I have noted that especially I guess all three of the trinities are good taxonomical distinctions, if nothing else. So, in other words, I do think that people respond to anger in general with chow chow, or with that's it, I'm walking away, or with oh, don't be mad. I think those do comprise three categories of response to an angry person. Is it definitive or mechanical or something that's I'm trying to operationalize terms about or anything like that? No, but see, I make that distinction. When I'm talking about an enneagram, I'm talking about sort of a metaphorical taxonomy that is useful in describing things as they appear, but not in explaining things. The difference between describing things as they appear and explaining things. So, nine points? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess it must be a 9-pointed star because there's 9 numbers. But it's like, I think each person gets, I don't know. There's a certain like integration, disintegration shape too. Like I said, I'm not an expert on a Negro. So you're asking the wrong guy. I looked into it and I realized that it's limitations. It's not something that you can really critique in the same way you can critique cognitive functions because it's not a process analysis. And not talking about functions. Functions are something that can mean you're talking about a language now. As soon as you use the word function, you're talking about a language like math, where there's an operator like me, and there's operations that are done by executing functions on objects within a given field. Math limits that field to one field, namely numbers on paper, the external or internal metaphysical. I guess internal too. The 2 fields, the metaphysical fields. But you can take measurements in the physical world and stuff like that. I have to work today at 4:00. But you know what? I'm feeling okay about that. I'm not feeling like fussy about that at all right now. I'm feeling like that'll be fine. I've gotten a lot of sleep. You can kind of see I'm got a little bit less dark circles under my eyes. Getting a lot of sleep. Rachel and I have both been sleeping our asses off, just like 12 hours a day of sleeping. So it's kind of nice. It's rewarding, like, it's SI rewarding. And I can feel my emotional energy is coming back to well, I mean, I don't know. The point is, if you start off not knowing what you're doing, you're guaranteed to both neither succeed nor fail. It's you got to define your mission, or you're going to have a mess on your hands. My beard's really getting bushy. Thank you, Hambone. You are wise in the ways of words. Thank you for using your wise words to help me understand things better. That clarifies in my mind somewhat what the problem here is. I appreciate that. And that's part of the problem too, is I never had a really clear understanding of exactly what the problem with socionics was, because I could point to examples of problems, but it's like, problem in what frame? Problem how? How are we defining a problem here? And that's what I can't get. I couldn't get Jack to even begin to get to that ground which we needed to get to, which is how are we defining a problem here? I mean, look, I think descriptively, socionics does a lot of things right. In terms of, it's going to say, because the mechanics are like this, here's the description. That's what it should do, I guess. It goes both directions, but what socionics does, it goes, here's a description of how a 6 slot works. Why exactly it works that way is not something we're really going to get into exactly, or it doesn't really matter, or I'm not sure. But the point is, as a description, it's not bad, right? So a lot of their slot relation ideas are not bad, and I took a lot of my own descriptions of the way slots work from socionics. So I sometimes call the 6-slot function well, yeah, something I have to come to terms with, horse mumbler. I have to come to terms with my own anger. Anger is never reasonless, though it may always be. Well, Lazarus PC, you need to have a sleepy week. See, I've been taking amphetamines for years too, but I take them for 2 weeks and I go off for 2 weeks. And I go on for 2 weeks and go off for 2 weeks. That is an endless cycle. So the point is, I think sociology does a pretty good job of lots of descriptions of how things play out, but that's not the same thing as explaining a mechanics underlying that sort of thing. Really? Well, I don't know how to explain that, Lazarus PC. That's not my experience with them at all. Every time I stop taking them, I crash hard, you know? But, you know, are you an INFJ? Or an ENFJ? Or an ENTJ? INFJs, ENFJs, ENTJs tend to have a lot of trouble with sleep in general. Have you tried melatonin? Have you tried melatonin, Laser PC? It's my turn. It's my turn to finally say that to somebody. Do you will yourself into the dream realm? Do you sleep? Do you sleep with your... Okay, well, even if you don't feel sleepy, do you sleep? Do you do it on a regular basis or what? Huh. Interesting. Have you tried Klonopin? That seems to work. I've never tried it, but I've seen it work wonders on my girlfriend.
Where is Wonder?
Hi, spectacularness.
Hi. What's going on?
Well, we're talking about sleep at the moment.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But I think I'm going to probably wrap this live stream up here pretty quick. It's been an hour or so, and I got to work at 4 o'clock. I think I should probably eat some Cheez-Its before I work.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have a full lunch because Dad's cooking dinner tonight.
Right.
So we want to be hungry for dinner.
Yeah. What about sleeping? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know, Desert INTJ. Clonopins or all benzos do prevent a risk of dependency. But the thing is, when you've got God level insomnia like Rachel does, it's the cure is definitely better than the disease.
Yeah.
Even if it does involve addiction.
I'm on 2 milligrams. He says it's nothing.
She's only on 2 milligrams.
And it's working.
And it's working beautifully. And the thing is, she's catching up on years of Yeah, I recognize it. It's true. It's a fair critique. Something I got to figure out. You know.
Rich, that's what I was talking about. You do tend to get very angry. You get angry very swiftly. Too often, you rush to wrath when it's not really called for. Your ability to readiness to recognize this, combined with your desire to improvise, is commendable. It is.
Improve. I think you mean.
With this.
Well, thank you. Where's my boy? He means desire to improve. He wrote improvise, but he means improve. It doesn't have to be, though. That's the thing, Overclocker. Shifting goalposts does not have to be the ENT way. It's not my way.
You said you outgrown. Yeah, you are a great example of a well-maturing ENTP. But you have also noted that knowing the cognitive functions has helped you with that.
That's true. That's true. Learning about cognitive functions has helped me a lot because it's made me sort of recognize the implicit equality between people and stuff. Okay, I'm going to end this stream. Thanks for being here, everybody. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.
Bye, everyone.
And
I want to do one card pull for
oh, sure, yes.
Klonopin.
We're doing a card pull for Klonopin. I think it's fair to say this is Rachel's relationship to Klonopin.
Yeah.
Let's see.
My relationship, yes, exactly.
Ooh, look at that, baby.
Fuck yeah.
Ace of Swords.
Man's dick.
So I think that tells you everything you need to know about whether Klonopin is the right drug for Rachel.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Yeah, okay, Horse Mom, I hear you. I hear you. I'm sorry, everybody, for my failures.
What happened?
Well, it's like what he says here is like, this. I get angry too quickly. I get angry, I go going too fast, and I'm not fair in that regard, and I take up too much of the sound.
It can be intimidating.
Yeah. Xanax gives you a druggy feeling. I'm glad she's not on Xanax.
Yeah, no. I've been, no. I would have said no to Xanax. I'm not depressed. Hi.
Well, I mean, the thing is, right now we're both sleeping a lot. Like, it's my belief, first of all, you can make up for lost sleep a long time after you've lost it. So you can lose sleep for years and make up for it eventually. And it's my belief, for me anyway, that I will always do that. When I give myself the chance to do that, I'll just end up making up all my lost sleep by oversleeping for a long time,
You are welcome, good girl. Thank you for letting me know.
And I think Rachel's making up for lost sleep because she's finally able to sleep with the combination of the Klonopin in an environment that's not keeping her skittish. It's like.
And he said too that eventually we'll step down from the Klonopin into something else as well. It's just that my sleep is so erratic right now. You were honest with him about the last fight we had and how my temper got and everything. He really wants to work with us.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
So
he also, I benefit him. I think beneficiary thing is a good. I'm the one in the seat, in the front seat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to think that's an area where I've done a good job of managing my interactions with the other person. In terms of my role, I'm being beside Rachel doing these psychiatry appointments and helping her to get what she wants.
Yes.
I think I've been quite successful in interacting.
So successful. Yes, you have been.
So
You've been key. Because I can't articulate or fight for myself. I feel like I've been fighting for a long time, so it's a weak spot in me.
yeah, I can see how like you started getting fighty after we had already won the fight.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, Rachel, this is your timing's off here.
I know. No, but it really is because it's like, you know, I guess habituated, but I don't have to worry about that anymore.
Hard Mumber is using very careful Effie because I think he understands that while I'm good at responding to critique, I do respond in general better to a pat on the back than a kick in the ass.
Mm-hmm. No.
So he's being very deft in his intuitive understanding both of me and extroverted feeling.
That's nice.
That's the answer to your question. I had you last. I appreciate it. DSP system is more wrong. DSP system is silly wrong.
Anchor Jason, but I feel you. I knew someone who was an ISFJ who said that I would benefit from working in the Nassau County for the Nassau County, New York government pretty much. And I was like, I knew that I would have to show a lot of restraint in that job if I worked there. So I was like, no. Thank you for the offer, but no.
Yeah, a couple times. Okay, you're right. But not often. Usually I add to that. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to end the stream now because I want to have plenty of time to chill before work. Before I have to work for 2 full hours. Oh no. Apparently, before I go, I do want to say this. Apparently, my student's history teacher, I'm supposed to work with him on history because he got disconnected from this history lecture that was about the difference between the Cold War and postmodernism. I was like, what? Well, and so I've been thinking about it. I'm going to have to explain how postmodernism is an intellectual response to some of the underlying modernist principles of the modernist principles that underlie the Cold War. Anyway, that should be kind of fun.
Ooh, what PP? Oh, she's
I will.
playing with my dress.
She is a
cute.
wonderful kitty friend. Let's show the people our wonderful kitty friend. Since Octavia said bye to Pee-Pee. Pee-Pee, Octavia said bye to you. Where are you? You're smelling my pee bucket.
Aw, there she is.
There she is. All right, bye everybody. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. This is like 6 false goodbyes.
Mm-hmm. So I will get sunglasses.
Cheers, Horse Mom. You're the best.
Cheers. Yeah.